interrupt this program to bring you Courage, the Cowardly Dog Month!
Whole month of Courage, the Cowardly Dog! First appearing in 1996, it was picked up by Cartoon Network, who work in the middle of Burbank, and directed by cartoonist John Dilworth. Though many years have passed since the original air date, it's now time for Zack Morris to celebrate this great show!
Well, old sport, what do you think? Huh. Neat. Hey guys, Zack Morris here, and welcome back to Courage Month. So the episodes we're actually going to be reviewing today are Bad Hair Day and Forbidden Hat of Gold. So let's get into both of those. Okay, so this first episode is actually interesting. It starts off with an industry called Growth Max, who are they're running hair experiments, but they're running out of money. So they're not getting paid enough to conduct experiments. So they start branching out to actually find more test subjects they can get, because they need people with an extremely rare blood type, AB XYZ, which is a made up blood type, by the way. But they call around to make some calls to actually figure out who they can find with a rare blood type, and they wind up calling Dr. Vindaloo, who's initially against the idea of breaking his patient doctor confidentiality, until they offer to pay him a ridiculous sum of money. At which point he points out that he does indeed have a patient, and also he's currently with said patient, who is indeed Muriel Baggs. So, at which point, after her doctor's appointment, Muriel returns back to the house, where suddenly there's a knock at the door. Muriel actually answers the door to discover a guy from Growth Industries, but in any case, the guy from Growth Industries actually responds that he wants Muriel to be a test subject for a new hair care product, and that he'll actually pay her for the services. And Eustace wants to take the money immediately, but Muriel tells him not to be greedy and says that she's not interested. So the man then proceeds to offer her an even larger sum of money, which again Eustace tries to take, but again Muriel turns it down, and eventually the guy responds, "Have it your way," and then leaves. At which point Muriel suddenly gets a call, which is implied to be the same guy who called Dr. Vindaloo, but they call and tell Muriel that her spleen is twisted and that they actually need to fix it. So she's actually told that she'll be going to the hospital for a couple of days while they try to make sure that her spleen is attached correctly. So yeah, and then a bunch of orderlies from Growth Industries actually grab her and pull her off to the truck, and Eustace is just a little bit annoyed because she's no longer able to make dinner, presumably for the next couple of days. At which point Courage decides to call up Dr. Vindaloo and ask him what's going on and about if she's actually going to the hospital. But Dr. Vindaloo is reluctant to actually tell Courage what's going on, pointing out again that he doesn't want to breach his confidentiality, but it does let it slip that he actually was paid a large sum of money to tell everybody the Growth Industries Muriel's information, and also he's been paid so much money that he actually can afford a hot tub in the middle of his practice, and is actually able to just playing with it with a submarine boat. So Courage, realizing he's not going to be able to get the information from Dr. Vindaloo directly, instead goes to Dr. Vindaloo's office and goes to go get the information that he needs that way. He actually sneaks into Dr. Vindaloo's office, steals the confidentiality stuff, and then when he sees the information that's labeled in Muriel's file, he panics and then brings it back to Eustace, who picks up almost immediately that something shady is going on. So after Courage shows Eustace the file, he realizes that Growth Industries actually abducted Muriel, despite her saying no multiple times, and declares that if they're not, that they're going to pay, hopefully with cash. So he and Courage then get into Eustace's truck, and they drive down to the main Growth Industries testing site, which is a giant office building. At which point they knock on the front door, and are greeted by Eustace's mother, who is revealed to own the place. And Eustace is a little confused since she never mentioned it, but she does point out that she mentioned it a whole bunch, and that she just didn't tell him, presumably. But in any case, she does reiterate that she's happy to see Courage, but then points out that she is indeed running, she doesn't indeed own the building and is indeed the CEO of the place. At which point Eustace demands to see Muriel, pointing out that he believes that she may be there, but while Ma Bag is in denial about that, when Eustace sticks his foot in the door and demands that he see his wife, she then decides to give them the grand tour, showing them all the different things that they do, including helping people grow their hair out to make temporary shelters, acrobatics with using hair, and a couple of other really funny things. But in case, after giving them the grand tour, she then proceeds to kick them out and offers them a complimentary wig for coming to visit, which Eustace decides is more than enough for him. And then puts it on over his hat, weirdly enough, and decides that it's not actually all that bad, and decides to actually just leave. But Courage is less than enthusiastic and believes that Ma is hiding something. So he climbs in through the mail slot and actually sneaks his way into the main testing facility inside of Growth Industries, and eventually discovers that he actually does indeed find exactly what he's looking for. As it turns out, there's a special testing room that is designed to hoist people up by their stomachs and then kind of grow their hair out like chia pets. So yeah, which does understandably freak Courage out, but then he notices that Muriel is one of the test subjects, and she calls out to him. At which point he runs up to her and climbs up on top of her to try and get her down. But it's at this point where Ma Bag actually shows up with 2 security guards and tries to chase Courage. So Courage, realizing that he needs to actually get away from them, actually climbs up on top of their heads and runs away from them, carefully dodging them so that the machines actually attack the guys instead. And eventually he does wind up finding a blow dryer and actually tries to blow them away, which doesn't work. So instead he uses the blow dryer to set up the sprinkler system, which causes the hair on everybody's head to grow completely out of control. At which point it is now a lot thicker to walk around on the hair, and the 2 security guards wind up getting into a wrestling match with Courage, but Courage winds up successfully defeating them. At which point Courage tries to unbury Muriel from her hair, using a lawnmower, which he apparently finds. Tries to unbury her from the hair, but then Ma decides to take matters into her own hands, first by shutting off the sprinkler system so that the hair stops growing out of control, and then climbing up to where Courage is so that she can actually try and defeat him. But Courage then proceeds to bury Muriel so that they don't know where they've been, and then they start ducking in and out of the hair, which with Ma Bag being unable to actually get any closer to Courage, as it's kind of a comedy thing. But eventually Ma Bag emerges from the hair with Courage inside her wig, and then Courage when she tries to actually swipe at him and try to get him out of her hair, literally, he pulls her wig clean off and she runs off crying. So at which point he then decides to actually go and unearth Muriel and actually pulls her out and pulls her to safety. And then proceeds to start running toward one of the windows so he can actually open it, but finds out that the window actually does not open, and also one of the security guards is coming after him. At which point Courage throws her up, ducks under the security guard, who goes out the window, and then tries and fails to catch Muriel, who just lands on the hair instead. At which point the fire department actually show up and escort everybody out of the building, because Courage obviously set off the sprinkler system. But Ma Bag actually shows up with the guy with the guy who actually came to the door, and she's sobbing inconsolably while the guy actually rolls up the window and they drive off. So in case, back at the Bag farmhouse, Courage then proceeds to start picking Muriel clean of all the hair that had grown on her. But while Courage is actually doing that and actually finishing all of that off, Eustace actually walks in covered in hair, and it's implied that he actually went forward with the experimental treatment, and because he's greedy and he obviously would accept the money. So in any case, that's how that episode ends. So this showcases Ma Bag's first antagonistic role. She wasn't really an antagonist in her debut episode, nor was she an antagonist in a previous episode that she's been in. But this episode implies that she will indeed show up as an antagonist from time to time, not necessarily as a villain, but it is interesting. And it also makes perfect sense that Ma would actually be running experiments for hair growth, because obviously she's bald, she wears a wig, so it makes perfect sense that she would do this. But in any case, that's my review of Bad Hair Day. On to the next review. Okay, so this episode, Forbidden Hat of Gold, is actually interesting in that it's a kind of a thing that Eustace's late brother Horse actually discovered, and he apparently left the map in the house. So yeah, just increasing evidence that Horse was the one who originally owned the house. But and in case, it starts off with Eustace watching a history documentary by Professor Frith about a secret society who hid a forbidden hat of gold. And how nobody was allowed to touch it, but the location of the hat has largely been lost, save for, and it's largely because it's owned by a secret society. And currently the only person who knows where that is Horse Bag, so who made a map to it. At which point Eustace realizes that Horse likely has the map somewhere in the house, and decides to go looking for it, even pulling his brother's picture out of the stuffed deer head that hangs over their main fireplace. Pointing out that he wondering if his brother did indeed leave him a map, but he's worried Courage is actually going to overhear him, so he yells at Courage to get away from him, and Courage isn't entirely sure what he did, so he goes back to watching TV. At which point Eustace runs upstairs, and after digging around under the mattress for a bit, actually winds up pulling out the map for the secret hat. And he realizing that he can actually use the hat to become fabulously wealthy, decides that he's going to take his family with him to actually go and find the hat of gold, but decides he's not actually going to tell them where they're actually going. And of course, this causes Muriel and Courage actually walk into that exact moment and only hear the latter half of that. So Eustace lies and says that they're actually going on vacation, and then proceeds to take them in the middle of a jungle following the map to the hat. So, and Muriel is kind of skeptical about the fact that they're actually going to a 5-star hotel in the middle of the jungle. But Eustace just continues to insist that they actually are going on vacation, and still continues to lie about the fact that he's not going to they're actually going on vacation at all. At which point they eventually arrive at an open clearing and with a large stone monument and come across a plaque. And the plaque actually it rhymes, but basically it tells people that greed will be their undoing. So if they come in there with vanity and greed, it'll cause a lot of problems. But Eustace completely ignores the poem, and decides to just keep going, and eventually finds a cave system to go duck in and find, and believing that the hat is actually in there. And he does indeed lead Courage and Muriel in, who by this point have figured out that Eustace isn't actually taking them to a hotel. But eventually Eustace does stumble upon the hat of gold, which he goes to take, but Muriel swats his hands, pointing out that there's a sign that says "Do not touch," but pointing out that it'll be rude to actually take the hat. But Eustace, of course, doesn't listen and takes the hat anyway, at which point the chamber starts to collapse. And Eustace actually is leading the charge. Actually, she leads them out of the facility, which is out of the cave system, which is currently collapsing around them. They wind up going through a series of traps as well. They wind up going through a hallway where it's a poison dart hallway, but instead of poison darts, it's pies, and they're just kind of being flung everywhere. And Courage actually winds up getting hit by one. Then there's again, instead of a spike pit thing, it's boxing gloves, which again, Courage is the only one who gets hit. At which point they find a massive chamber full of exit signs, which is just designed to disorient people. And eventually Eustace just goes eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and decides to just go with whatever. So they go out, and they believe it's the exit, only for it to be revealed that it is actually a fake exit and is actually a poster, which they come flying out of. And Courage, realizing they're about to fall in lava, actually pulls out a dart gun with a rope on it and fires it at one of the cave walls and pulls them to safety, which they continue running on the path. But then a giant watermelon comes down and tries to flatten them, Indiana Jones style. So they do eventually find the exit, and run out of the cave that they were just in. But they wind up running into the leader of the Hooded Society, as well as 2 of his underlings. And the long story short, the leader is annoyed with him. He's annoyed with the fact that they actually stole the gilded hat of gold, and points out that they should have read their warning. With Eustace and Courage just glaring Courage and Muriel just glaring at Eustace angrily. And then they're actually led to the Society's dungeons, where they're all chained up and shackled against the wall, and as they kind of try to figure out where Eustace actually hid the hat. But since they can't find him, they can't find it, and Eustace is in denial about the fact that they're actually cultists, and Cole just calls them a bunch of hippies and that they're toothless. But they decide that since Eustace isn't going to give up the hat willingly, that they're actually going to sacrifice somebody, and that they have a minute to think it over. But at which point Muriel scolds Eustace, pointing out that they actually need to bring him the hat. That he necessarily needs to give up the hat, and wonders where he hid it. But Eustace just denies the fact that he actually took the hat at all, and is implied that he hid it on his person somewhere. But he's not telling anybody where he hid it. So. At which point the cultists come back and actually unchain Muriel from the shackles and actually bring her out to the main monument, since stating that they warned him. But and which causes Courage to realize that he needs to actually save Muriel, since Eustace is completely in denial that anybody is in any sort of danger. So Courage actually pops his head off again, reusing a trick that he used to get out of his leash that one time. But he pops his head off, puts it back on, and tries to break it out of the door. But the cultist merely yells at him, pointing out that they should have paid attention to the poem. And remembering what Muriel said about the poem, Courage decides that he actually knows how to actually defeat the cultists. And after working out a whole bunch so that he's bulky enough to actually break down the door, he then notices that Muriel is actually on a dais, and that she's standing in front of a large stone statue, which gets up and starts moving and is revealed to be sentient, and is about to presumably eat her because she's being offered as a sacrifice to it. At which point, Courage decides he actually needs to figure out a way to do something, and then calls up Mr. Mouse again, who turns out runs a delivery service in his off hours. But he shows up and brings a bunch of packages to Courage and which Courage then pays for by credit card. And then at which point Mr. Mouse gets back into his truck and leaves. And it's at this point where Courage reveals what his plan actually is. He offers the giant statue monster a luxury coat, and then offers the rest of the cultist luxury coats as well. And this kind of causes a bit of a paradox where their vanity actually, because they're given luxury coats, they actually become vain and greedy because they like how the coats actually look. Which causes a paradox that causes their entire society to literally collapse, and Courage is just barely able to escape with Muriel and get on a boat and go away and float away. At which point Muriel points out that the very important lesson that they learned from this, which is that they should always heed warnings, especially if they rhyme. But then wonders if Eustace got out okay, because obviously they left him behind. And Eustace turns out to be fine for all of about 5 seconds. He emerges from the revel, realizes everybody collapsed because of the entire society collapsed because of their greed. But then he takes off his hat, and it's revealed that he hid the gilded hat of gold inside his own hat, which doesn't make sense, but cartoon physics, so I'll allow it. And then puts the hat on, gloating that he's finally rich and that he likes it when he's rich. But then the hat turns him into dust, and he collapses, and he just complains about it being a stupid hat. So yeah, ultimately this episode kind of combines the two previous elements, which is that Horsebag was originally an explorer, and Eustace's greed caused him to actually go after a treasure that his brother wrote a map for, but didn't want anybody finding. So yeah, ultimately it wound up costing Eustace and his family, because they wind up going there, stealing the hat, and wind up getting in over their head when the cultists want their hat back. Eustace's greed just winds up screwing everybody over yet again. But it is interesting that Horace actually did leave a map to where it is, even though he didn't want anybody finding it, which is interesting. So yeah, this episode just kind of further established that Horace is indeed a legendary explorer. But in any case, that's my review of Courage the Cowardly Dog. What did you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below. or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. Also, be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well. If you want to help support the show, it does really help me out, and obviously, it helps create future projects like this. So if you guys want to check these out, by all means, link is down in the description. Just go check that out, help support me. And finally, if you want to see more content from me, there's actually 2 ways you can do that. One is by checking out my Twitch down in the description below. I stream every Sunday at 2:30 Eastern Standard Time. So if you guys want to go check those out, by all means, link is down in the description. I'm also streaming a bunch of horror games to go along with Courage Month, so be sure to go check those out down in the description. And also the other way you can actually see more content from me is by actually checking out the videos linked in the end screen. The top video is the most recent video. It may or may not be this one. Whereas the bottom video is a video recommended to you based on what you've already seen from me. So if you want to try something new or see more of what you like, then be sure to check both of those videos out. But regardless of whether or not you do any of those things, thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace!